Welcome to our event with Agenus Wonderplanets. It's November 7th, 1999. Agenus is a revolutionary raw food advocate. He's a man whose passion is contagious. He's been an inspiration to us, and he's here today to talk to us about his program and answer our questions. So please help me welcome Agenus.
Hello. Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to sit, sit all the time. I'm Agenus Wonderplanets. We're here about learning how to prevent and reverse all disease. At least I've discovered that you can. I was born a very sickly child 52 years ago. I was born into a violent household where a brother who was 18 months older than I, still in diapers, was very sad about me coming home and taking the attention. So he pretty much began my life by torturing me the day I got home from hospital. And it went on until he went to the Vietnam War when I was 15 and a half. That put a lot of stress on me because I was always terrified. My father didn't know how to control his temper either. He popped my eardrums one time. He said, "I told you to listen to me." Did that and broke both eardrums. Another time he put a golf club in my head, a 9-iron, right through my skull, all the way in. And that went on for quite a while. So by the time I was 10 years old, I was pretty sensitive to everything. So I had my third polio vaccine, and I had a traumatic reaction from it. It gave me peritonitis. It was misdiagnosed as appendicitis, but they took out the appendix while they were in there just in case it gave me trouble in the future. And then by the time I was 13 and a half, I developed diabetes. I didn't begin taking insulin at that point. But I was diagnosed with it. No direct treatment at that point. By the time I was 15 and a half, I developed angina pectoris with muscle spasms in and around the heart so severely that I would pass out. They didn't know what to do about it because I was so young. So I would have these spasms in class, and I would fall in the aisle, and they would just let me lay there for about 20 minutes. Then I would get up, and class was going on normally, so this was all normal for me. I didn't know anything else. And then I got married when I was 16 years old, and then my son was born the first week of my senior year in high school. So I had to go to school and work at the same time. School was very difficult because I was dyslexic and borderline autistic till I was about 15 and a half, 16 years old. My wife and I didn't have to communicate with words at all. So it was very easy, and that's probably why I got involved with her. And I was very sensitive, so she liked that. I was dyslexic to the point where if I looked at the printed page, it swirled, and I got vertigo, and I'd vomit. And back in the 50s, when I was learning to read, they would not allow children to use their fingers to keep their place because they said it developed bad reading habits and it prevented the mind from moving quickly. Mine couldn't move at all because this page was spinning, and they thought I was just giving them a tail. So I basically had to cheat my way through school. And I did a good job of it because I was a pretty good artist. I would look at this massive objects and figures on a page, and I would copy them. Everything that the neighbor or the girl that was smart next to her would write, that's what I would write. And And sometimes, of course, the images weren't clear, so they were completely gibberish. But nobody seemed to call that to my attention. Don't know why. When I got into college, it was okay because there were teachers that began understanding it, and they gave me oral examinations, but always told me if you can't read and you can't write, you will never be successful. I said, well, I am what I am. That's all I can do. So by the time I was 19, I ended up in a divorce because I was so dysfunctional, and basically I handled anything, any problem, any difficulty the way I was raised to, and that's with anger. So that didn't make for a good partnership. I was not a good partner. So I ended up in a divorce at 19 with an ulcer. The doctors treated that with Maalox. I had enough Maalox to turn into a chalk. I was going to donate my body to, a school. And they treated, that developed a tumor, that caused a tumor, all that Maalox. So they told me anytime you have the discomfort and the acidity in the stomach, take the Maalox. So I was taking bottles of that. They told me no restrictions or anything. It caused a tumor next to the ulcer. So they decided to treat that by giving me a vagotomy pyloroplasty, which means they cut me open from here to here. They went in and severed all the vagus nerves to the stomach so I would never again be able to digest anything. So I wouldn't have the hydrochloric acid there to irritate the ulcer so it could heal. Well, if I'm not eating anything, how the hell am I going to heal anything? Short-sightedness is beyond me, the medical profession. So then they also stretched the pyloric 3 times its normal size so that food would get held up in there, maybe bile would dump in there and some other, who knows what they thought would happen. But they just wanted the food to be held up in the duodenum. So basically I was, anytime I ate anything at all, especially meat, I got terribly sick. I broke out. My face looked like hamburger most of the time. And I was not an attractive child to begin with, and then, to have that happen, it was pretty traumatic. Then the incision began keloiding, and it got about 2 inches wide and about 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch high. And they became a little alarmed and said, well, we better irradiate that before it becomes tumorous, before it becomes malignant. So they gave me massive doses of radiation treatments for about 10 weeks. And it damaged my entire spine because they irradiated me all along here. And, of course, the radiation goes through the back. Got a little story about that. One time I was traveling through Oklahoma, and I asked the woman at the cash register not to scan my food because it's low-level radiation, and an accumulation of that can cause me to get nauseous because I had radiation therapy. And she says, "You were kidding." And I said, "No." She said, "Just a year ago, I was a radiologist, and I quit because when I was taking a photograph of this man, I spaced out this one day and left 2 shields right over the area where I had to take the photograph. And I thought I had wasted the film. But I developed it, and it came out just as clear as there was no lead shield." She quit the next day. Now she was going to quit being a cashier because of the radiation with the scanner. So the radiation gave me blood and bone cancer. So they say, okay, now you're in really serious shape. Multiple myeloma, maybe 2% of people survive to 7 years, and that's all. Everybody else dies. And those that live 7 years do it feebly. So we're going to give you some chemotherapy to make sure you make it beyond 3 months to 6 months. So maybe we can give you, a few years, maybe 7 years. At this point, I was still walking. I had severe back pain all the time. And I went through 3 months of chemotherapy, and by the time that was over, I was an invalid. I couldn't walk. I couldn't go out of the house without a diaper. I couldn't be away from a toilet without, for more than 5 minutes. And I couldn't be on the bed because I would, usually when I got up, I would get so dizzy in combination with the diabetes that I would pass out and hit the floor. So I began living on the couch, and I would roll off the couch on the floor and scoot my way around the house on my elbows, and sometimes use my legs. But I was so sore in the back and so in so much pain that it was not easy. So I refused all treatment after 3 months. I said, you guys absolutely have no idea what you're doing. You guys are killing me. I had an ulcer, and here I am dying of 3 types of cancer. And at the last time I went, which was 4 months after I began chemo, they had diagnosed it as also having a lymphoma. So then I developed 4 types of cancer, but I was not going to go back for the confirmation. They had given me enough bad news as well as creating the bad news. So that was the last time I ever went to a doctor, and I was 22 years old. I went home to die, and there was a hospice nearby, and rather than to stay there, I didn't want to be crawling around all over the floor. So they had some of their volunteers come over and, clean the house, and some of them would do shopping and sometimes fix food for me. And one of them brought a little pamphlet over, a little booklet, about 82 to 86 pages, and it was, this woman had written it who had claimed that she cured herself of ovarian cancer by drinking a gallon of carrot juice a day. I said, I beg your pardon? Carrot juice cured her of cancer? I have 3 uncles who are doctors. Well, only one's still alive. And 8 aunts and uncles who are nurses. My mom's an RN. And my father was an inventor and scientist. So anything like that was absolutely a bizarre notion. Food has absolutely nothing to do with your health. Well, wait a minute, if you're ingesting all these pills, how can that have an effect if whatever else you're putting in your stomach doesn't have an effect? I mean, they have all of these double standards and non sequiturs that don't make any sense. But it took me a while to figure that out because I was enmeshed in that thinking. So this fellow at least got me to try the carrot juice and didn't believe for a second that it would ever cure anything. But it tastes delicious. And if you've ever been through radiation and chemotherapy, you know that you don't taste anything anymore. Nothing tastes good. This carrot juice tasted good. I loved it. So I began drinking it. In about 10 days, my dyslexia disappeared. I could read. I felt I was in heaven. I'm going to die, and now my life's starting. Reading, to me, was a big thing because I was so embarrassed that I couldn't. I'd be called in the class to stand up, and all I could see were lines and symbols. I didn't know what they meant. I could not read, so they would laugh at me and ridicule me, and the nuns were horrendous. And I went to a Catholic school, and they were absolutely conscienceless. And so I was elated and excited to be able to read. I didn't really relate it to the carrot juice, and I just stopped drinking the carrot juice because I was so excited. Went out and got $110 worth of books, and I began reading, mainly about nutrition. Because I was hoping for something. Stopped drinking the carrot juice, my dyslexia returned. Drank the carrot juice again, my dyslexia disappeared. Stopped drinking the carrot juice, it came back again. I drank it, it went away again. So I was convinced after 3 times that it was the carrot juice. spurred my mind into raw foods of all types. Foods, vitamins, supplements, I was after everything. And everybody had this spiel on vitamins because in 1969 and 70, that was the new big thing. Supplements, supplements, supplements. It was a big market. I mean, not anything like it is today. Now the pharmaceuticals into it, industry is into it. Back then, they weren't into it. Now it's big money, they're into it. But none of those vitamins helped me, and I took a lot of supplements. The only thing that I found that worked for me was raw food, and it worked all the time. I always felt good and better. So I decided I wasn't going to find the answers in this society, and I put most of my cancers in remission. Not, I should say, in a reversal state, in a dormant state. Wasn't getting better and it wasn't getting worse, but I was able to function. Still had a lot of back problems because of radiation therapy. I guess because of all the severance of many nerves that lead back to the spine and to the brain. And I began bicycling all over the North American continent, seeking out, primitive ways of healing. I knew I wasn't going to find it in our society. So I lived with coyotes, alligators, Eskimos, Native Americans in Canada and Northern America, and northern United States, all the way down to Yucatan with some ancient Mayans, descendants of the Mayans. And along the way, I heard about the raw meat. Of course, I poo-pooed it because everything that I had read in alternative, especially the spiritual thrust of the time in the hippie age, and I definitely became a hippie. I had the long hair and the beard, and I was bicycling around. And, it was a much more enjoyable way of living for me, living outdoors. I liked that. But living outdoors is very, very, very stressful. You have the elements, you're always outside in that kind of weather, either windy, hot, cold, no matter what it is. You're going through sometimes from 30 degrees to 80 degrees, 90 degrees even. Temperature changes. Very stressful on the body. So after 6.5 years on a fruitarian, vegetarian, raw diet, my multiple myelomas resurged again. My diabetes was in with a vengeance. My psoriasis. So I decided, I didn't find the answers, so I'm going to die. So I decided to fast myself to death in an old Indian burial ground. So there I was, a couple of weeks. This den of coyotes who lived up in the canyon would come down every night to go hunting. And they'd wake me up about midnight. And they would do this little dance and this little thing. And one night they brought me a jackrabbit. Jackrabbit was about this high, about 7.5 pounds or so. And I hadn't eaten meat in 6.5 years. One of the reasons I stopped eating meat was because I loved animals. I was not going to kill an animal. Of course, it didn't dawn on me that I would go out and rip off a leaf, off of a lettuce, that was also dismembering it, or killing a carrot by eating it. It didn't dawn on me at that point. So I was very against it, but I remembered all of my educated background of saying, if you ever come in contact with a wild rabbit, do not, even if you cook it, do not eat it, because they contain an enzyme which can kill a human being in a very, very gross way in 24 to 48 hours. I thought, hey, that's what I want. I will have to go maybe 40, 60 days suffering in a fast. 24 hours, 48 hours of suffering, I can do that. So I decided to eat this rabbit. So I sat down with the rabbit and ate a bite. It was warm and it was bloody and it was gooey and it was soft and it was squishy, and so it came right back up. So I decided, okay, that is not going to work. So I decided to psych myself out. I sat down in 5 minutes and said, okay, tough guy, come on. You can do it, you can do it, you can do this. You're going to do this, you're going to do this. You won't suffer 60 days. Okay, let's do this. So I ate it, and the more I ate, the tastier it got. And I felt compulsive, and I was eating and eating. I ate about 3.5 pounds. Then I let I didn't have to let them. They just came and took it. The coyotes shared the rest of it. So I went back to my campsite to die. And I had had near-death experiences twice on the operating table and once on a recreational drug trip when my blood level went so low that I died for 4 hours and 17 minutes. And I remember leaving my body. I remember the euphoria of letting go of the body, having no pain, no ill sensation, and this wonderful euphoria of love stretching infinitely. So as I lay down and waiting to die, waiting to go into pain first, I felt this euphoria. I thought, I'm already dying. I'm not going to suffer. This is terrific. So next thing, I wake up in the morning and the environment's the same. I'm not in heaven. I didn't go through the sun like I did, in my death experience. The tunnel, when I went through it, was not a tunnel. It was actually the sun. So when I went through the sun, I became the sun, swelled up and went out and became the universe. When I did this experience, I had none of that. I just woke up, but I still felt good, and I had no pain. But as soon as I started moving, then I could feel it again. I said, oh, I'm still here. I waited 3 days, no ill effects from the rabbit, and I felt better. So it had to be the rabbit. So meat. I remember the Indians tried to get me to eat raw meat. In fact, the Eskimos fooled me into eating raw meat. They take caribou and they beat it into a mince and roll it in whale or seal blubber. They fold it in a pouch, like from a spleen or a bladder, and they bury it under the ground about 6 inches, and they wait for it to rot for about 6 weeks, and when it smells a half a mile, it's ready. And they will eat it like it's candy, and they do this in summer, right, getting ready for the winter. And they actually eat it. I mean, they love the smell of it. And I couldn't get within 5 feet of it without vomiting. So I took cotton balls with musk oil from the actual moose balls, and it shoved it up my nose. And then they sliced some off for me, and I'd run over and grab and stick it in my mouth and run back and swallow it. And it worked. I had maybe the size of a golf ball. The next day, I was warm for the first time in my life. Now, I had multiple myeloma. I hadn't gotten rid of it. I just put it in suspension. I was cold all of my life, and cold to the bone. If it dropped below 72 degrees, I was freezing. I would chatter. I would just shake. Here I was already getting down to, in the 40s at night in Alaska, and I was warm. But I didn't know it. They told me it was some remedy. But I didn't know at the time that it was raw meat. With all this blubber and fat that, of course, I would never eat, except for avocados. I ate a lot of avocados, like 7 a day sometimes, living outdoors, to withstand it, those temperatures. So I had poo-pooed meat all of this time. Even down in the Mayans talked about raw meat will fix you. Eat the raw meat. Eat the raw meat. I said, no, it's not spiritual, and it's gross. It forms lots of uric acid and all other kinds of toxins. Well, then after this rabbit, I'm feeling pretty good after 3 days, and I'm saying, okay, I've got to open my mind. Maybe this is it. So the first thing I ran into was a rattlesnake. So I stepped on his head, picked him up by the rattler, and I swung him around like the Sioux had taught. I watched the Sioux do, and they snap it like that, and the head shot right off. I'd skin it and eat it. and I just ate it. And it does not taste like chicken. It tastes like fish. Raw snake tastes like fish. So I ate it, and it was delicious. I began hunting birds and everything else, and then I decided, well, hunting's really risky out in the desert because you don't eat much unless you're eating scorpions, and scorpions didn't taste so good, and tarantulas are awful. And I actually ate those things. And so I started bicycling down to the farms, shoveling goat manure, for raw goat's milk, and eggs and chickens and whatever I could get. Within 3 months, I'd gained 30 pounds, and I'd gone down to 113 pounds. I gained 130 pounds, and I felt, I'm pretty good here. So I went back to Los Angeles to spread the great news. And they said, are you out of your mind? You're going to get a brain fluke, and it will eat your brain up, and then you will be a dope, a blithering idiot. You'll babble. And I said, you know something? I'll have to take that chance because I feel pretty good doing this. I've never felt this good in my life. I've never had this kind of energy. I've never felt this happy. In fact, I've never felt happy in my entire life. And I actually feel happy. I feel joy. So I'm going to continue eating it. So for the next 13 years, every time I ate raw meat, it was, it's going to be the time that the fluke gets my brain. So I was in fear. Almost every time that I ate meat, I thought, is this going to get me? Is it going to get me this time? Never did. So after 13 years, I started saying, wait, I got to put 2 and 2 together here. Okay, I have no vagus nerve. I have no hydrochloric acid dumping into my stomach. The medical profession and scientific community put me in the class of octogenarians who do not secrete hydrochloric acid, who they say are in danger of death from parasitical and bacterial invasion. Why am I not getting it? Why am I not having a problem? Are they so full of shit? Yes, they are. Their brains are so full of it. You think about this. You've got this huge, massive brain, and science and medicine go around bragging about how large man's brain is, and he only uses 5%. Why? Maybe it's a garbage dump. And I started thinking about it. Yes, toxins store in fatty tissue, wherever there's concentrations of fat. And you can't find any fattier tissue than the brain and the liver. And every time I look in people's eyes and look at the iridology, at least 60% of their brain is scarred and toxic, and is the most toxic part of the entire body. I met a guy yesterday for the first time. I've met somebody who actually has only 5% of his brain not toxic. What's he going to do if he loses another percent? Well, good he went on a raw diet, because I think he has a chance now. So here I realized that the medical profession was full of it. Full of ignorance, full of stupidity, full of blindness. The bacteria aren't a problem. The parasites aren't a problem. So you know what I did? I went out and ate pinworm-infested salmon. It undulated. I ate fluke-infested brain. Do you know what? I had my feces checked for 10 weeks. Not a sign of any kind of parasite. I was convinced of it. So then a lab technician and I went around collecting animals with every kind of fluke we could find. And we put them in 3 separate categories. This was a very expensive test, too, and I had to pay for it. We took dogs and cats with the various kinds of flukes, and we took several of each category and put them in 3 groups, 3 control groups. The first 2 control groups contained subdivisions in those. Group 1 and 2 of A, Section A. And that was the group that received only the canned food and the kibble, canned food and dried food. And one section of them received pharmaceutical-grade dewormers. The other group received herbal dewormers. The group A 60% of the group A1, 60% of them died. Of group A2 with the herbal dewormers, 40% of them died. Those the rest of them that recovered did not recover with any spirit after about a year and a half. The second group, group B, 1 and 2 also, they got all raw foods, raw milk, raw meat, raw eggs, and raw butter. Sometimes we give them a little bit of honey when some of them were very low in energy. Group 1 of Group A got the medical dewormer. Group 2 of Group B got the herbal dewormer. 20% of the ones who received the medical dewormer died, and about 7% of the group that got the herbal dewormer died. They progressed pretty well. They healed in about 9 months, all of them within 9 months, and they looked pretty good and did pretty well. The final group, Group C, was just one group. All they received was raw food, no dewormers. They did not have, they were slower in recovering, but when they recovered, they were all like kittens and puppies again. They were vital, they were dexterous, they were ambitious, they were everything. And some of these animals were very, very old. So what we concluded from that, and the tissue, we did examine the tissues with sonograms. He did take some x-rays, which I wasn't in favor of, but he took some x-rays. And the bones, everything, the tissues seemed a lot dense and more alive in the group that received no dewormers. So what we decided was that, or concluded was, that the parasites fed on the degenerative tissue, and as long as we fed them the raw foods, they were able to regenerate the tissue, and they were able to heal very quickly. So now for 17 years I've been saying parasites are good, bacteria is good, don't be afraid of them. People are still saying I'm out of my mind. But you know what went on CNN in December 1998, not even a year ago? Dr. Lowe from Yale came out with his test that said Salmonella shrinks tumors and reverses cancer. But we genetically altered it. Sure, you genetically altered it so you can patent it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work, and it does. It reverses cancer. You don't have to go out and buy their brand, which will cost you $50 a cc or something like that, or $500 a cc. And the University of Toronto, in conjunction with the Children's Hospital of Toronto, released in June issue of this year, a few months ago, of Oncology Journal, that the toxin produced by E. coli completely dissolves brain tumors and reverses cancer. Gee, why isn't everybody letting their meat rot and eat it? Like the Eskimos do. Like lots of tribes do, like the Turks do. They let their meat go green before they eat it.
Like the French do.
Yeah, they don't do it anymore very much for some reason. They used to. But lots of cultures used to do that. But our bacteria, microbe phobic culture has just made us more ill every day. Makes us more ill every day. When I was 10 years old in 1957, the death rate from cancer was 1 out of 1,000. Today it's 1 out of 3. And 2 out of 3 will get cancer. There's something wrong here. The propaganda is that you're getting healthy, you're living longer. Oh yeah? According to the statistics, we're not living long. In major cities we are, because in cosmopolitan societies, they didn't have refrigeration. Food got into the city spoiled. Hunting took place way outside of the territory because the local areas were hunted out. So if they got meat, they were lucky, and when they got it, it was stinky and full of maggots and worms, and so they did a lot of cooking because of that. Those people who lived in cosmopolitan societies had very short lives. But all the people living out in the farmland, they were butchering the chickens and eating the eggs and everything, very long lifespans, 140, 120, 105. Sometimes, of course, the elements were so difficult that some people didn't survive. But basically, they did very well. So again, we have propaganda, feeding us propaganda. So I ate lots of raw meat. I ate lots of various ways of having it rotted, stinky. And every time I would eat it, I got better. This is the first diet that I'd been on where I have not run into a brick wall. I still get better every day. In fact, he just said to me, he says, God, I saw you a year and a half ago, was it? And you look better. I said, good, because it's still working. And I do. I feel better every year. Now, according to Pottinger's work, it takes 40 years to get a body from ill health to optimal. Now, the way he surmised that or derived that was he'd take cats and he put them on. He had some that were on a completely raw diet, no diseases, no dental caries, no abscessed or deformed jowls, nothing like that. All bones created perfectly, developed perfectly. All the animals that he fed cooked foods, and there were various types of cooked foods all the way down to canned milk, which is the condensed milk, which is the most processed. All of the animals that got the most processed got the worst disease, and all the diseases that man got. When he would take those animals and put them on a good diet, it took 5 generations to get them back to optimal. The only thing is that he took that animal, as soon as it reproduced, he would kill it, commit an autopsy, photograph it, and show the development progression. But he didn't let an animal live its full life eating the raw foods to see whether that animal could reach its own optimal in its own lifetime. From my experimentation, I would have to say yes. Because I'm only 17 years eating meat on a daily basis, where I eat meat every day. Maybe 5 days out of the year I don't. But almost every day I eat raw meat, anywhere from 1 pound to 3 pounds. I can tell I get better every year. I'm already satisfied with my health. But I can see in my irises that I have scar tissue, massive scar tissue still in my bronchioles, all around my heart. I mean, ropes of scar tissue. All around here, the incision, the radiation around my spine, all around my intestines where they've done the stretching. Massive scar tissue, and 60% of my brain is scar tissue. That's why I'm pretty stupid. So I've got a lot of stuff to remove. I've got a lot to break down and get out. But my eyes were brown and green when I was going to die. I've cleaned out all of the acrid plaque and incrustations that develop from eating cooked food over that amount of time. I've cleaned those. Now I have to remove the scar tissue. I'm already satisfied with my health, but I still have 20 years to go. I can imagine what I'm going to feel like when I'm 72. I think it's going pretty well. And you have to figure when I was 15, I couldn't touch my knees. Now I can, touch the floor. So I get better every year. So I'm going to encourage you that if you want to be really, really healthy, forget everything that's ever said to you out there and eat lots of raw fat and eat raw meat. Eat lots of bacteria-infested food, and you're likely to get very, very healthy.
You said your eyes were green and brown?
Yes.
Now?
Now they're blue. Completely blue. Yeah. I just thought everybody could see that they were blue, but with the light behind me, I guess you can't see that. I look like a silhouette. I'm a ghost.
Yes.
Okay, this ends the free seminar session of it. We're going to go into a workshop after this. Anyone who would like to stay, it's $50. He takes a credit card or cash or check, anything like that. What we will do is answer any questions that you have. We'll go several hours. Also, I take a look at the palms, and I'll help you get started. Most people don't know what kinds of meat to eat, whether red meat, chicken, fish, what quantities, what proportions, anything else that they might need for their particular problem. So I will look in your palm, and I'll read the glandular areas and the skin a little bit, and look into the eyes a few moments, and then give you suggestions. It'll take about 5 to 7 minutes per person. And it's good to stick around if you're going to stay in the workshop to hear other people, because there's lots of information that could apply to you at some time, that you may have the same condition or the same changes going on in your body that I may suggest to someone else at that time. Okay?
Thank you, Audrey.
All right.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Oh, and my book's out there.
Oh, yeah.
My publisher hates me. I go to these talks and I never push my book. Book's in 2 volumes. It's 2 volumes in one book. The first one is the story of how my son, who's 35 now, when he's 22, is in an automobile accident, fractures his skull in 3 places, damages his brain by 1/5. They said nobody's ever lived with that much brain damage, and that he couldn't. And it's how he ends up going to college and graduating and being fine. So how I got him through that, and I also flashed back into my life, how I explored and got well, and other anecdotes of other case histories of people that I've counseled with nutrition and only food, no vitamins, no supplements. Again, they are just chemicals like anything else. And then Part 2 are raw food remedies for over 200 common diseases, and some explanation about how I perceive and look at foods, and a food preparation section and a storage on how to store food, like not refrigerating your eggs. Anyway, so the book is $29.95 if you like it, and plus tax, which is about $242 something.
Special today, no tax.
No tax. Okay. All right. All right. That gentleman's going to pay the tax. Okay. So $29.95. Or throw in a nickel and just make it even 30. There you go. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you stay.